Right. In this section, I want to look at the training regulations, and that's part 2 of the training regulations. And we're going to start by looking at the terms and hours of a training contract. Now, the amount of time that you're going to spend on the training is dependent on the educational level you got into the training contract. So, for example, if you've got a CTA or an equivalent course, you've completed your CTA, you get into 36 months contract. The same thing applies when you've got an accredited undergraduate program. So those are people that are coming into CTA, they're coming from an undergraduate program that is accredited by ICAS. They do 36 months, and the minimum hours of experience is 3,600. ICAS also allows A-level entry as well as any other qualification, which is not any qualification that I've listed above. They'll get into 5 years, which is 60 months of training. However, remission can be considered, and I'll deal with that later on. And in terms of hours, they're required to do 6,000 hours. So let's talk about remission. Just to summarize what remission means is, remission talks to you getting your time which is spent in your contract being cut, and normally this applies to trainees on 5-year contracts, where they can get where a training contract can be cut by 1 year for them to do 4 years, that is 4,800 hours, if they successfully complete an undergraduate degree within 3 years. So if they do that, they can apply to ICAS for their training contract to be cut by a year, and then they can only do 4 years. Also, I think just an important something to state, which is on the registration for the ICAS training contract. Now, one of the things that ICAS has noticed in the past is sometimes you get a request for registration when someone has already been doing their training for over a year. The biggest challenge with that is every trainee who is doing their training at an accredited training office should be monitored by ICAS. Now, if a trainee starts to do the articles and ICAS is not aware, the biggest challenge is if there are any problems, that trainee cannot be protected by the training regulations with regards to the right of trainees, because they are not recognized by ICAS. So ICAS requires that registration of training contracts should happen within 3 months of the employment of that particular trainee. And look at recognition of prior learning. Now, ICAS acknowledges that not all trainees who are coming into the training contract have never worked before. ICAS acknowledges that some trainees that are coming have got experience in the different competencies that are required by ICAS. So when a trainee gets into a training contract, ICAS allows the training office to look at the competencies that they already have and credit them with those competencies, and in some instances give them remission with regards time that they can do with regards to the training contract. Now, what are some of the most important rules is when you've got a recognition of prior learning, the documentation has to be lodged to ICAS within 12 months of the training contract. So what that means is you cannot come after 12 months, maybe after 2 years, and say, can I get my remission in terms of time? That will not happen. Also, remission can be granted then in terms of time if the training was done in a previous training office. Now, let me explain. In the past, when for some reason a training contract is terminated before it was complete, a trainee could suspend that, and then when they join another training office, then they would leave the suspension and continue. In this instance, with the new training regulations, when a trainee leaves the training office, that is not a basis for suspension. The training contract is cancelled. What this means is when that trainee moves to another training office, the training office, what they have to do is to get the evidence which the trainees bring from the previous training contract and then assess through this process of recognition of prior learning. In that case, they can now give remission in terms of time previously saved. Now, what's important to note when it comes to remission, whilst ICAS will create the trainee with competencies, but it will not grant remission in terms of time if the training was saved outside an ICAS training office, particularly if the contract is for 3 years. Now, let's talk about secondment. ICAS acknowledges that sometimes it's important to second your staff. Sometimes staff are seconded to training offices within the network of firms. Sometimes they're seconded to another department, or they can be seconded to another company, just to make sure that they get the relevant experience. These are the key guidelines in terms of secondment. Number one, the only seconded to work that is relevant to the ICAS training program, which means a trainee cannot be seconded for a period to work in something that's totally unrelated to the ICAS training program. In that case, that is not secondment. Again, when someone is on secondment, the employment status does not change, which means we still recognize that they're still an employee of the seconding firm. Having said that, the training officer has a responsibility will remain as per the ICAS training contract. Earlier, I was dealing with suspension. Now, so suspension cannot happen where the training or the employment contract has been terminated. In that case, it's cancellation. Now, suspension has to be lodged within 30 days before suspension. And these are in terms of the permissible grounds of suspension. Number one, someone can suspend their training contract because they're pursuing full-time study. So a trainee can decide to go and do CT on a full-time basis. So in that case, they can suspend the training contract. Secondly, a trainee can suspend the training contract as a result of maternity leave. Now, with most maternity leave, as per the labor laws of Zimbabwe, sometimes trainee can get up to over 90 days. What that means, it becomes an extended period of absence, and the rules allows that during that time, the contract can be suspended. Then the third one is where there's severe illness, the trainee is not feeling well and they have been, for a long time, they're not coming to work. The contract can be suspended. Now, the implication, if the training contract is suspended by 3 months, what this means is the contract end date would be extended by another 3 months to take into account that there's a period within the contract in which suspension happened. Move on and look at cancellation. What are the grounds in which a training officer can cancel a training contract? So the training officer can cancel the training contract for a trainee if they are no longer studying a relevant qualification, which means the trainee's ability to demonstrate that they can become a CA is significantly limited. Also, if the trainee fails to meet the requirements of registration for an accredited program, say the trainee has completed their accounting program and then they fail to register for CTA for reasons that they cannot meet the requirements for registration, what that simply means is they cannot continue with the training contract. Also, to fail to sit for an exam without reasonable explanation is a good ground for cancellation of the training contract. Right, still on cancellation, you also look at if the trainee has been dismissed from work, which means there's no longer the employment contract. Also, the contract can be cancelled if there's non-compliance with training regulations. So a breach of the training regulations is good grounds for cancellation. Failure to initiate successive assessment forms. Now, this one is very important because sometimes trainees take this one very lightly. If the trainee is not raising the assessment forms as required for 2 consecutive times, it is enough grounds to cancel the trainee contract. Another reason is failure by the trainee to achieve the prescribed competences. The trainee got into a 3-year contract. At the end of 3 years, with assistance and intervention, still they are not competent. It becomes very good ground for cancellation.